All right. Thanks for joining me. And we got a good show. We're going to talk about some good things, whether you're a college player, high school player, whether you're a coach or a parent. This is going to be some things that you want to pay attention to. So, we're going to talk about the steps to follow to have success at the college level. And these are the steps that are brought down from the Olympic level in my years in working at that level. So, basically, I'm going to share with you the steps, or the stages the great athletes follow. Okay? And this is not only in golf, but this is in all sports because all the ultra elite athletes follow this. And when you do follow one in turn, it gives you a great opportunity for success. And this is the model that I run in EPS, and I have for many years. And if you do it, you're going to set yourself up for great things. And so if you never met me before, I'm Sean Humphreys. I'm a high performance coach, and I specialize in changing the performance of individuals, whether you're highly skilled or you're on the way to being one or just want to improve your performance. You're in the right place. That's all I can say. So if you don't mind, I want to make sure that you guys can hear me. Give me a thumbs up. Love to have a wow face, man. Show me a little love with a heart. And hey, and if you don't mind, let me know where you're watching from, okay? What city, what state. And also, please knock out the comments for me if you would. And because on the rebroadcast, I love fielding those questions. And the reason why is because it spurs on other topics that can spin away from, not really away, but maybe more into what we're talking about tonight. So also this broadcast is going to be available on YouTube, okay, on our YouTube channel. So let me kind of give you the backstory here as we go into this. So every athlete starts at a particular stage or level, okay? Everyone does. And from my experiences, and especially at the Olympic level, it's extremely important to understand what level you're starting at, okay? And especially if you're going to have any type of success at all. And attaining your goals doesn't happen by chance. We know that. They're all achieved because the athlete has or is becoming someone that they've never been before. And that's why it's so important to understand the stages that you're at. And when they accomplish these goals, we call that attainment. So it takes anyone a particular time or period to become, and when they've become, attainment is basically waiting for them. And that doesn't necessarily mean attainment of winning championships. More or less, it's, when we get into these stages, you'll understand it's about stringing together winning performances. And when you start stringing together winning performances, attainment's right there. And I can't express the importance, of really understanding this. So when we start going through this, my goal this evening is for you to get a grasp of what these levels are, how they're broken down, and how they can help you become better at what you're doing, and more importantly, help you accomplish your goals. So the first stage that that we look at is, and this is any sport across the board, and in this it's called training to learn. Okay, every athlete, when they come into a certain period, they're always training to learn. All right. Now remember, if you watch some of our other episodes, we talk about the skill acquisition piece, how important that is. We know how important the skill acquisition piece is, but we really don't discuss how important the skill of the knowledge base, how important that is. We talk about getting reps on the skill side, right? Getting how many reps all the time, getting those reps in. But we've got to get reps on the knowledge piece. If you don't have a chance to grow your self-image. You don't have a chance to learn how to prepare for competition. Half the time you're going to overtrain and overtry in competition. So the knowledge piece, I can't express that enough. So in training to learn, in this stage, athletes are learning techniques. Okay, all right, that's a given. Language of techniques, language of systems, if they're starting to run a system, the coach's language, how communication's done, the procedures, the protocols of these systems. In a nutshell, they're learning the steps in the physical skill acquisition and the skill and the knowledge piece. So in the learning piece, we can't discount training to learn, because a lot of times, I know this, is that having the opportunity to spend time with these high-level athletes around the world, these guys are hyper skilled, not only on the skill acquisition piece, but they are hyper skilled on the knowledge piece. Okay? And that knowledge acquisition is so important in training to learn. It's not just getting up there and hitting a ball. It's understanding, this includes, learning how to train and training to learn, how to set up your training, how to follow the training levels so that you don't overtrain and overtry. How do you follow them on a daily schedule and not deviate from the system? I mean, if you don't have a system to follow to attain your goals, you're probably in trouble. I mean, you really are. I mean, so to follow this on a daily schedule and not deviate from the system, I mean, this creates, basically, you're learning accountability. And you've got to have that accountability to keep you on track. And especially the coaches keeping you on track. I mean, you look at any successful organization, any successful coaches, they've got a system that they're following. And you have to learn all of these protocols before you can really start advancing yourself. In the knowledge acquisition piece, athletes are learning how to set up their training and follow these training levels. So in the training to learn, man, you're learning techniques, you're learning how to set up your training, you're learning how to follow those protocols on your training, you're learning how to set up your pre-tournament rounds, you're starting to learn how to prepare for competition. I mean, on the surface in training to learn, you're learning to do that. Okay? Hey, just FYI, gang, we're live on Facebook tonight. I'm Sean Humphreys, your host. Hey, if you're a college player, if you're a high school player wanting to learn to play at the college level, or if you're a coach or you're a parent, hey, tune in, log in, join in, ask questions. So we just covered the first level, which is training to learn. And I'm gonna share some really good stories with you here in just a second as we go through this. So the next step is training to compete. All right. Once the athlete has begun to increase their capacity in the language and learning the skill-based knowledge and being able to manage their training, their own training techniques within reason, okay? For example, run and execute plays, even manage their game, and we can now begin to train these athletes to compete. It's a travesty. There's so many times that athletes are shoved into competition and they don't even know what the expectations are. They don't know what the expectations of the coach, the expectations that the coach has, let alone what should be my expectations. All right, and we're going to get into that a little bit more because, man, when you start advancing us along, man, this gets us some really good stuff. So once they start training to compete, they've got to be able to manage their game at a reasonable level and be able to train at a reasonable level. So what does that look like? First, our training model, they learn to work through all four levels, which is training for field, training for the shot, training for the golf course, and training for competition. And they work their way up all the way to training for competition. When I started in this 20 years ago, and still to this day, they don't train for competition. Nobody does in this sport. And when I'm talking about training for competition, I'm talking about that your training has higher consequences than the competition. So, we use the Olympic training model, which honestly, if it works, if it's not done at the Olympic level, I don't do it. And if it works at the Olympic level, it works anywhere. And so when you use this training levels and you work your way up for competition, this training's based on, when you start growing this, your intellectual capacity skills start to grow, okay? in competition training, it should be in training to compete. Your training should be slightly above the competition level, okay? And that was a piece that was really missing in my teaching in the very beginning. I hadn't a clue how to train my athletes. All I did was go to the technical piece, just like everybody else. Work on the technical, fix it, and send them on their way. Send them on their way to do what? They don't know. And we expect, as teachers, we expect them to go off and work on their games on their own. Hey man, I was just as guilty as anybody else. And and when my players played well, I had no clue why they played well. They just hit it better than everybody else. And when they didn't win, I couldn't tell you why they lost. So when you start growing your knowledge piece and your intellectual capacity and your skills start growing, you can start training for competition, okay? And it should be slightly above, the competition that you're training for, all right? It needs to have higher consequences in preparing for competition, okay? All right, in this level, you should be learning the mindset program. And if you don't have a mindset program, you need to learn one. And I can tell you what I did. And it is a game changer for me. That's why we were able to build out EPS. And if you can't control your thoughts before the action, during the action, and after the action, you're probably in trouble. And if you don't work on growing your self-image to where it becomes like you to do it, you're going to be in trouble too. So in this level, you should be learning the mindset program, learning to control your thoughts before the action, during the action, and after the action. You should be learning steps in preparing for competition. Now, not only that, you should be learning the steps in how you start preloading the golf course. What does that look like? Well, we have softwares that we use, and you bring them up, and you can. It's like Google Earth on steroids, and they're sports specific, so that. Bottom line, if you are not getting to the point in training for competition that you're rehearsing the competition and the things that you're doing that are in competition, so you're going to show up and play a practice round like everybody else, and you haven't seen the golf course, you've done no preloading whatsoever. You're going to play the course the night before and try to build all your strategies and everything you do in a 4-hour day. My question is, how's that working for you? I know it's not working because my athletes were doing it. And the competition piece, you've got to be able to map it out. You've got to learn, you've got to be able to mentally rehearse it, every single shot that you're doing. And those are the things that we're doing with these athletes. And again, hey, we're on Facebook Live. I'm Sean Humphreys, founder of Elite Performance Systems. If you just joined in, we're talking about taking the steps to follow to play at a higher level, whether it's in college or if you're a high school player or you think about doing this for a living. I'm talking to guys with that all the time. So, and then also when you talk about intellectual capacity and you talk about the knowledge piece, now we talk about the mindset piece. We talked about preloading the competition, preparing for competition. Now you got to learn the reinforcement phase. So there's 3 phases to a task. There's the anticipation phase. What do I think about before the action? Okay, that's the action of the day. What do I think about the action of the week? How am I start preparing for this competition this week? Okay, now you've got the anticipation phase, then the action phase. What am I doing today? What am I doing this week that's going to prepare me for the competition? That's the action phase. And then the reinforcement phase is, what are you doing after the task? What are you doing after the preparation each day? Do you just leave it when you leave practice? Well, I can tell you what, the best in the world, they sit down and they unpack every minute that they did that day. Every task, every training level that they went through, they write about what they did. And that reinforcement phase grows the self-image. The principle of reinforcement it states what you think about, what you talk about, and what you write about improves the probability of that thing happening, good or bad. And believe it or not, people imprint bad things. It's just where our society is, man. Are you kidding me? Everybody goes to the negative. Everybody looks at what people are doing wrong. But I can tell you what, world-class athletes don't even think like that. If you've checked out my landing page on Sean Humphreys Golf, you saw that interview that Drew Brees did. If you haven't, you need to check it out, because he talked about just coming back and the things that he was doing to get himself back in shape with his thumb. People don't do that. People don't even know how to do that. He's talking about, man, I'm always throwing a ball when I'm not throwing a ball. He's rehearsing it all the time. I've seen it in person with him. And he's dry firing and imprinting all the time. So that reinforcement phase is critical in everything you do, especially in learning how to compete or training to compete. Okay? As we move down to the third phase here, now we're moving into training to win. Okay, so you've got, first is training to learn, training to compete. Now we're moving into training to win. Okay, now in training to win, we've got to understand this. This isn't about winning championships. Okay, this is not about winning the trophy. This is about training to have winning performances. Okay? And at this level, athletes have begun to be able to replicate and duplicate what we were doing in level 2, right? In training to compete. So now that they can replicate these things and duplicate these things, and you start seeing some consistency of what's going on. They can now plan, they can set up, and they can run their daily, weekly, and monthly training schedule and draw it out. In my onboarding program, man, these athletes, they're nonstop. They upload their schedule to me every single night, what they're doing tomorrow. And on Sunday, they upload the entire schedule of what's going on that week, so I know exactly how they're training, what levels they're working on, what pieces of their game they're working on. Where are they at with their 5-footers? What's their personal best? And how are they doing in their distance putting and their short game training? And we have training journals that we use in conjunction with our performance journals. Those are critical in training to win. In our training journals that we have, every athlete, when they set up a segment to train, after that segment of training, man, they reinforce what they did. And because if you've got, you're going to work on your 5-footers, you're going to work on your short game or your distance putting, you're going to work on short game, you're going to work on your pitch shots, you're going to work on your distance wedges. That's over 5 hours of training in one day. You can't remember all that stuff. You've got to write this stuff down. What did I do? What did I learn? What solutions do I need? And then you turn that and you carry it over to your performance journal, the Olympic performance journal that we use. And man, that unpacks everything. And I get to see all of this stuff from every athlete every day. They upload it, we review it, we have conversations around it. Players at this level have developed a higher skill set physically, and they also have advanced their knowledge-based skills. You've got to. You've got to advance your knowledge-based skills if you're going to train to have winning performances. In this level, they've got higher goals. They train at a higher level than training to compete. So when you talk about training, man, not only did it not exist in this sport of golf, training for competition, raising the consequences of your training is how you advance yourself, right? I have these conversations all the time with these athletes, and I'll ask them, I said, so tell me, what's your personal best at 5 feet? And how many did you make in a row, and when did you do it? I don't keep track of that, coach. All right, so you work on your distance putting, don't you? Yeah, I work on distance putting all the time. So tell me this, how many consecutive 2-putts have you had in a row from 35 feet different strategies. Okay? What's your personal best and when did you do it? Coach, I don't keep track of that. I said, oh, you work on your short game, don't you? And they're like, yeah, I work on my short game. I'm pretty good at it. Okay, cool. So tell me this. What's your personal best on consecutive up and downs at different shots around the green? What's your personal best and how many did you make in a row and when did you do it? Coach, I don't even work on getting up and down. So if you don't measure it, how do you manage it? And if you can't manage it, you can't advance your training to where it has higher consequences than the competition. How do you train to have winning performances? It's not going to happen. I can tell you. The reason is because I saw it, and I saw it happen before my eyes, and I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and that's why I started learning this stuff at the Olympic level. In training to win, we're building capacity and their ability to learn and train. That's what we're doing in training to win. We're building capacity and their ability to learn because we're writing down everything that we're doing. I mean, Stanford did the study. The more when you write something down, it increases your memory by up to 35 to 40% when you physically write it. It's your DNA, man. You've got a certain way that you write. You've got to think about what you're writing. Okay? Now, this also builds tolerance in training for consequences. Okay? When your consequences get high and higher than the competition, you start building tolerance. Okay? And that's important. It's an important factor in developing athletes is building tolerance and also variability. I mean, golf is full of variability. If you don't like variability, you can freaking quit the game, man. I mean, so training to win has a lot of levels that you have to go through. But if you follow those and they're systematic and they're defined, they're measured and they're timed and they're organized and they're planned out and it's done on a weekly schedule, you're going to have a chance. You're going to have a chance to have winning performances and learning how to set goals for competition. I mean, you need to have outcome goals and position goals every time you go into competition. I mean, I ask people all the time, so what's the goal? I don't know, the goal's to play good. How's that working for you? You need to have an outcome goal and a position goal in training to win. All of this is in training. Everything that we're talking about is training. And it sounds like we're talking about competition, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. And, well, it should. It should sound like competition. Because your training should sound like competition. It's not practice. Practice is not defined. It's not measured. It's not timed. Training is. And this is stuff I learned at the Olympic level. Let me tell you something. Freaking works. I mean, you don't believe me. You just look at all the successes that we've had on our Facebook page and all the posts. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You can't do it. All right, so now let's move into the final level. So we've got training to learn, training to compete. We just talked about training to win. Hey, if you just joined us, I'm Sean Humphreys, founder of Elite Performance Systems. We're Facebook Live. I appreciate you guys tuning in, logging in, joining in. Give me a little love, give me a little heart, give me a thumbs up. I appreciate it. Hey, tag somebody, get them in here. There are people out there that need this so much. I know my phone's ringing off the wall, which is fantastic. I'm talking to parents on a weekly basis, talking to parents every day about their athletes and having these college golf discovery calls and what does it look like, because they're not getting anywhere in their training. They're being dropped off with their teachers, and the teachers are probably doing a pretty good job on the technical piece. But that's where it ends. And there's a lot of great technical coaches out there. But it just ends. They're on every street corner. But when it comes to mindset training and performance training and building intellectual capacity on getting the reps on the knowledge skill acquisition piece, nobody talks about this stuff. But they do at the Olympic level. And all this is scalable. It's scalable from Olympic level all the way down to professional level, to the amateur level, to high school, to college, to high school. I've scaled this down to and taught 8-year-olds. And yes, some of the kids that were in my academy, and they'll tell you, we had some 8, 9-year-olds that were learning this stuff. So all you got to do is have a brain. You don't have to have the physical skills to think like an Olympian. All you got to have is a brain. Okay? All right, so now let's talk about this 4th level. Okay? So training to advance. All right? So training to win is probably the most important level. And that really kind of rounds out the 3 levels: training to learn, training to compete, training to win. But this last level, which I've gotten to experience, this is really for your extreme high-level athletes that are world champions, Olympic champions, Super Bowl champions, NBA, Major League Baseball, world-class sprinters, whatever the sport is. At this level, they are trying to advance themselves one more tick, one more level. They've won an Olympic gold medal, and you know what? They're going back. And this requires a much higher strategic plan that involves your goals, your training plan, and your competition calendar all together. And first, your goals must be set at a much higher level than before. So think about it. If you have an athlete that won a gold medal and he's going to go back and try to do it again, most of these guys are figuring out how these guys are training. They got to change it up. They got to reset their goals. They've got to hit the reset button every time. Here's something to remember. Don't ever forget this. Anytime you accomplish a goal, you always hit the reset button. And you always have another goal to take its spot every time you accomplish one. That's why we're so big in our training. We're so big on personal best and keeping track of our personal best. We don't look at averages. We don't look at stats. That stuff's not brain compatible, and I've said it a million times, and I'm going to say it again. It's not. If you're sitting around looking at a stat sheet and you're looking at all the averages, average in fairways, average in greens regulations, average 2 putts, average 1 putts, average up and downs from 10 yards off the green, 20 yards of green, 30, 40, 50, 75, all the way out, bounce back, everything. Oh my God. Think about it. All this is an average. You didn't do those numbers. It's the sum of all your good, all your bad, and in the middle, and they average it out. And if all you do is look at averages and you look at these numbers, what are you imprinting to be? Average. What do the ultra elite guys do? All they do is imprint their personal best. Just like I was talking about when I was doing these interviews with these college athletes. Tell me your personal best. Personal best are something that you actually did. I did that number. Yes, I made X amount of putts. Listen to this. So, I mean, you think this stuff is crazy? So when I was running my academy, I'd have kids come in. I'd start them at 3 feet, then I'd move them to 4 feet, then I'd move them to 5. And if they got really good, before they graduate, they moved to 6 feet. Okay? And I had some guys that would go in entire summer and not miss putts inside of 4 feet. I had 8, 9, 10-year-old kids making 60, 70, 80, 90 3-footers in a row just because of the way that they train. All right? And when you start graduating up as a college player, you've got to get to 5 and 6 feet. And that needs to be the first thing that you start with every single day. And it needs to be the thing that you end with. Because if you want it to become like you to do something, then you need to train like it's you to do something. I got a friend of mine out in Seattle, and he's a coach, but he's also a player. Been working with him for a few years, and so I started working with him, got him to the 6 foot length, right? He called me several weeks ago and said, "Hey man, I just broke my personal best at 6 feet." And I said, "It was 61, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." So his personal best was 61 in a row at 6 feet. I said, "So Mark, what's the new personal best?" He said, dude, 91. 91 in a row from 6 feet. Tour players can't even do that. Tour players don't even train like that. I mean, this guy makes everything from 6 feet and in. Why? Because he trains like that. So when you're talking about training to advance, man, your goals have got to be set higher than before. Second, your preparation in training must have higher consequences, much higher consequences. And third, your competition calendar must be at a much, much higher level, okay, than the training to win stage. All right? When the athlete is this strategic, okay, it allows them to be extremely tactical. You can't be tactical unless you're extremely strategic. And in order to be really strategic, you have to have a lot of knowledge base. You've got to get the reps on the knowledge base. And I'll reiterate it again. You've got to learn the mindset program. You've got to learn the anticipation phase, the action phase, the reinforcement phase. You've got to learn how to set up your training. You've got to be able to film it. You've got to be able to take a look at it. Nobody films their training. I'm talking about all aspects of their training. Nobody films it. All of our athletes do. They film every segment and they upload it so we get to look at it. I don't care if they're in Indonesia or they're China or wherever. We get to see. It's like us being next to them all the time. And we keep an eye on it. We help them manage that. I mean, they film in other sports, don't they? Oh my gosh, working with the Saints, they watch more film than, that's all they do is watch film. Why? Because they're reinforcing the things that they need to do and they're looking at it, right? They're thinking about it, they're talking about it, and they're writing about it. You can't film enough. And our college coaches are really starting to film their athletes in competition on a regular basis. Ask yourself, when's the last time you filmed yourself in competition? Probably Zippo, right? Never even thought about it. Well, that's why I got so sick and tired of being sick and tired in my sport, and I got out of my sport to learn some things in a different sport like the NFL from Coach Parcells and Sean Payton and Mike Zimmer and the late Tony Sperano and these guys about how to train for competition. And then I went to the Olympic level and got introduced to one of the best Olympic coaches in the world. And here I am today running one of the best training programs on the planet. Why? Because we train like Olympians. It's not complicated at all. And so the key is you've got to you've got to get the reps in on the knowledge base. Okay? I can't emphasize that enough. And then you've got to get the skills piece. So when you talk about these levels of training to learn, training to compete, training to win, and training to advance. When I was with the Saints and at training camp, Sean Payton and I are talking all the time about this stuff. And it's interesting, when he got his guys together, he started talking about this. He got them together and he says, look, he goes, guys, everyone here is training to learn. Everyone is. And we're talking about guys that have gone through high school, they've gone through college, and now they're at the NFL. He goes, we run one of the most complex offenses in the NFL. And I assure you, their playbook is those great big 3-ring binders. It's that thick. That's their playbook. And if you're on the offensive side, man, you're doing a lot of training to learn. And he's saying, look, we've got guys here that are rookies, okay? And you guys are in seriously training to learn. You're learning the operations, you're learning how things are done, how the communication's done, how the language is done, everything across the board in training to learn. A lot of these guys are still learning all the time because Coach Payton, man, he's always inserting new plays in that these guys have to learn. He goes, now we've got some guys here on this team that have been here and they're training to compete. And they're training to learn their positions and they're training to compete day in and day out. and have an opportunity to have winning performances. And he goes through, hey, this is what we do in training to compete, just the things that I just talked about. Okay. Then he says, hey, now we've got some guys here that have been on this team for a while that have won. And that's still our goal, is to have winning performances. And if we string together winning performances in training, let me tell you something. There is a huge difference in professional sports and at the Olympic level from the guys watching them in competition and watching them in training. I'll tell you, Drew Brees is really good in competition. He's really good. He's one of the best of all time. You ought to see that sucker in training. You haven't seen anything like it. It's amazing. The things that he does, nobody gets to see. He takes it to a whole new level of his training, much higher, much higher than the consequences of competition. And when he hits Michael Thomas for a 40-yard out, his training is so high level, it looks like a water buffalo walking across the field. It's so slow. He doesn't miss. Why? Because he's raised the consequences of his training so high. Okay? And when Coach Payton's talking about this, training to win, to have winning performances, that's what these guys are doing. And then he gets into the last piece of training to advance. And he says, guys, he says, there's only one guy on this team that's won a Super Bowl, and that's Drew Brees. And he wants to advance it again. And he's the guy that you can learn from and that we can all learn from. And we're trying to advance this thing on a regular basis. But if things are not defined, if they're not measured and they're not timed, we cannot measure those and advance them to a higher level. And I'm going to tell you, Coach Payton, he was a Parcells guy. And I got time to spend a lot of time with Coach Parcells, and I see why. I see why he's the best play caller. He gets everything out of his players. It's unbelievable. And his coaching staff is absolutely impeccable. It's been a great learning experience for me. I get to bring these concepts back into my training, and I get to work with them, with the athletes. It's some cool stuff. So for a little recap, training to learn, we're all in that phase. We're always in the phase of training to learn. And then training to compete, we've got to be able to manage that piece. We've got to be able to manage what we're doing on a daily basis so that we don't overtrain and overtry in competition. Okay? And then training to win is being able to raise our consequences much higher, our training, and that our training has so much higher, our consequences are much higher than the competition, that competition feels easy. 95% of the athletes are out there, they're struggling. Why are they struggling? Because they're overtraining. When they get in competition, they overtry, they start freaking out. It's the same 5% that's doing all the winning 95% of the time. The 5%, all they do is just trust. That's all they do. The 95% overtry. The 5% are the ones that are training and following these types of models so that they prepare themselves proportionately based on their intellectual capacity, based on their skill set, and growing their skills, their physical skills, and their knowledge skill acquisition. And then you got training to win, and then training to advance. Very few get to the training advance piece, but man, it sure is nice to be able to experience some of that stuff. Man, I hope you've learned some things tonight. Man, I always enjoy putting these programs and videos together for you. If you're interested in being a part of my private client group, let's schedule a discovery call and talk with you. Maybe it's whether you're a coach, you're a parent, you've got a young one that's getting ready to go into college or he aspires to do that. I spend my time, I got 25 plus schools around the country that are running our system, so I'm on the phone all the time with these coaches and working with their teams, so I have a pretty good insight of what that looks like. Our onboarding program is unbelievable. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast as much as I have enjoyed putting it together for you. Join us each Wednesday at 8 Central, 9 Eastern for these live broadcasts. Hey, and if you know someone that might benefit from this video, hey, pass it along to them. I appreciate you joining in. Give me some comments, and I'll catch you on the rebroadcast. More importantly, I'll catch you next Wednesday. Have a great evening.